Well, good morning, everyone. It's Bronie here again for another day in Bronie's world. And at Bronie's desk today, I have a local to me anyway, a local guest speaker, not an international one today, although he's going to be internationally famous after this morning's session. We have the amazing David Conning. Hopefully I got that right. He is a trainer for the first aid, well, instructor, aren't you? First aid instructor with one of our local first aid companies here called FAM.
FAM.
Okay.
First Aid Industrial Medical.
Yeah, there you go. So right here in my little hometown of Tari. And just to note, my husband and I keep our first aid qualifications up. We've been first aid qualified for years. But anyway, we are going to do our renewal next week. So anyway, I thought, because, you know, guys, it's very important, particularly as I'm a certified holistic health coach, but I believe it's really important for all of us to be first aid trained, because we never know when we are going to come across a situation where we need to give assistance to someone, no matter how little or big that is. So I thought it was really important for my spring cleaning your health to have a professional in that field come on and share with us the importance of having your first aid certificate, getting that training and that knowledge, and then to also share with us a little of a few things that, particularly this time of year, can be of danger to us here in Australia. Now, David, my friend, he's become my friend. Everyone's my friend until they make themselves my enemy. But anyway, David is a registered nurse for many more years than he'd like to remember, so he tells me. He was, I believe, the head of the emergency department at our local hospital here in Tari for many years, for a trainer. He will correct me if I'm wrong. and a cert all in training and whatever you call it. But anyway, with no further ado, David, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can correct me because.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is David Conning by nature, and Conning by name. I am a registered nurse still, and yes, I've been a registered nurse for more years than I care to remember. I also have a certificate in emergency nursing. No, I wasn't the head of the emergency department at our local hospital, but I was the clinical nurse educator. So I was responsible for teaching and training nursing staff, and also teaching and training nursing and medical staff in advanced resuscitation methods. With that, perhaps we could start by saying, why should we have first aid? So we already protect ourselves and our families in many, many ways, don't we? So we insure our property. So we've got our car insured, we have our house insured, we might have our life insured, so that when we die, our family are cared for financially. And then, you know, we sort of insure our future, if you like, by superannuation and investments. And so we try to ensure that when we finally retire, we're going to have reasonable finances to support our lifestyle. And if you're a parent, you would take action, for instance, if your child was being bullied at school. So that's just some of the ways that we currently protect our families. We tend to be rather blasé, don't we, about our day-to-day living. And And really that's down to the fact that nothing really unusual happens on a daily basis, does it? It's usually the same old Groundhog Day sort of thing. But life-changing events can happen in the fraction of a second. And so why wouldn't you want to protect yourself or your family by learning what you need to do in the case of an emergency? And that's what first aid is all about. Now, some people may be reluctant to do a first aid course. They may be reluctant to provide first aid because they're afraid of any legal consequences. Should they perhaps do something that could be construed as being the wrong thing? Well, in actual fact, in Australia, and I don't know about other countries, but in Australia, first aiders are actually protected by law. There are a number of acts that first aiders are protected by. And I have never heard of any case that went to court where a first aider was successfully litigated against for providing that initial treatment. Now, that does have some provisos, and the proviso is that you don't do anything that is outside your scope of practice. So, for instance, I say to my students when they're doing first aid, no, you're not allowed to do an emergency tracheotomy. You're not allowed to do open chest cardiac massage or any of those things, but they can do the things that we teach them in the course that we provide. Now, the course that we provide is available in Australia at training.gov.au, and you can have a look at that, and you can do a search for first aid courses, and you can see the curriculum there. Now, providing you do things within that scope of learning and practice, you would be covered by law. It's actually an offence to prevent someone from providing first aid in Australia, which I find sort of very interesting. So it's springtime here in Australia, although you wouldn't know it. I've actually got the heater on in the room at the moment because the wind is bitter here, so that they're having snow down south, but it's spring, and all the nasties start to come out when the weather starts to get warm. So the snakes are starting to come out now. Snakes and lizards are what's called poikilothermic, which means that they can't actively warm themselves, but they get out in the sun, and the sun warms them, and as they warm, they become more active. So as a consequence, as the weather warms up, the snakes are out, and the other reptiles come out. So one has to be really careful, for instance, when you're going bushwalking. So you never ever should go bushwalking by yourself. You should never ever go bushwalking without a first aid kit, and especially containing at least 2 pressure immobilization bandages. And I'm saying at least 2, and most kits will have the 2. You can buy a snake bite kit, which you can put on your belt, and it does contain the 2 bandages. The reason for that is that you would wrap the pressure immobilization bandage from, say, the tip of your fingers up to your armpit, or from your toes up to your groin. So for tall people, which I'm not, I could probably get away with 1 bandage, but for tall people, they would need 2 bandages to get up to the groin. So other things that can happen, obviously, as the weather gets warmer, people like to go swimming, and drowning is still a leading cause of death in Australia. And that's not just the ocean, of course. It's rivers, and rivers can be really, really tricky because of currents and because of unknown depth and that sort of thing. But, you know, a lot of people come to Australia on holiday. And unfortunately, many people who, if you ever watched Bondi Rescue on the TV, many people who are rescued actually come from Asia. We get a lot of people from Asia and from China come over here for holidays who are not used to being around the ocean and get caught by rips and pulled out to sea. And of course, you know, if you're not a strong swimmer or you don't know how to manage if you are caught in a rip, they get into a lot of difficulties, and a lot of drownings, unfortunately, are of Asian people. And then, you know, other things that will happen in spring is the flowers are starting to bloom, and there's lots of allergies. So there's, you know, it's very windy here today, so there's lots of dust flying around. So people are susceptible to that. And of course, along with allergies, we have things like anaphylaxis, which is the severest allergy you can get. You may not know that you have a severe allergy, maybe your first time. But for those people who have suffered from anaphylaxis, they would generally be carrying at least one, but I would advise probably 2 or more EpiPens, because the EpiPen contains adrenaline, but the adrenaline only lasts for about 20 minutes. And after that time, the symptoms are going to recur. And so, you know, these are the sort of things that we teach in our first aid courses, how to give an EpiPen appropriately. And a lot of people, you know, when these emergencies happen, people panic. And when people panic, they tend to do silly things. And so if you have been shown and you've actually practiced a couple of times, it's much easier. It becomes much easier then to know how to give an EpiPen properly. And I remember a number of years ago now, there was a child in a preschool who was allergic to nuts, who swapped one of his lunchtime sandwiches with his little mate next door, but his little mate had peanut butter sandwiches. And the child had an anaphylactic reaction. Well, he was carrying an EpiPen. Unfortunately, the carers or the teachers didn't give the EpiPen properly. And so the child didn't get any adrenaline and the child died. So, you know, it's becomes important to know how to do these things properly and, you know, try not to panic. And the other thing, of course, with allergies, and there are other things that cause asthma, but allergies is one of the things. Exercise or smoke, obviously pollens and that sort of thing, animal danders, cold weather, all of these things can cause asthma attacks. And I was reading fairly recently that around about 90% of asthmatics don't give their medication to themselves properly, which is rather amazing, isn't it? So, you know, during the course, we teach people how to provide the inhaler to people properly. We don't see as many asthmatics in hospital these days as we once used to, because a lot of asthmatics these days are on an asthma prevention plan. And so we don't see as many as we once used to. But I have personally witnessed asthmatics dying from their episode. So it becomes really, really important to be able to give them their medication, to give it appropriately. And the other thing in terms of, you know, wanting to cool down is people go along and they wade in the water, they wade around the rocks. And of course, in Australia, we have little nasties hanging around the rocks called blue ring octopus. And when the blue ring octopus bites you, that paralyzes the respiratory muscles. So you die a fairly horrible death. So it becomes important to know what to do when these things happen. And then I used to come from a place called Penrith, and that's next to the Nepean River. And people would come along and wade along the banks of the Nepean River, and they would step on a fish called a bullrout, and that has a spine that people would stand on. And you would see big men coming into the emergency department in agony and in tears from the pain of these stings. So it becomes important to know what to do for these particular things. So we teach how to put on pressure immobilization dressings, how to treat bites and stings, that sort of thing. So they are the things that are probably associated with spring and summer and that sort of thing. But of course, there are many events that can happen any time of the year. So if we go through a few of those, so let's look at cardiac. Let's start off with the cardiac arrest. And many years ago, the British Heart Foundation brought out a video which looked at compression-only resuscitation. So CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So that comprises of compressions of the heart and artificial breathing. But a lot of people wouldn't be prepared to do the artificial breathing. So the British Heart Foundation were promoting compression-only resuscitation. So that's compressions without breaths. And there was some surprising results from a Swedish study. And there was only a small difference between those people who survived having had CPR and those people who survived having had compression-only resuscitation. And there wasn't a huge difference between the results. In the United States, every year, around about 220,000 people have an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. They have a big population. They have over 580 million people. But surprisingly, 4,000 of those out-of-hospital cardiac arrests are children, which is quite surprising, isn't it? Yes. And in Australia, the figure's around about 25 or 30,000. And around about 500 of those, they can't actually find the cause of death. And there is a website called SADS, S-A-D-S. And SADS stands for Sudden Arrhythmic Death Syndrome. And on that website, if you go to it, it actually says that every week, around about 8 to 10 young Australians below the age of 35 die from a sudden arrhythmic death every week. So that's around about 500 people a year. So that's the number of people that they can't find a cause of death. These are the people that first aiders can help. There are quite a number of causes of a cardiac arrest that first aiders can't deal with the underlying problem. So, for instance, hypoxia is a cause of a cardiac arrest, but we don't carry an oxygen cylinder on our back. Hypokalemia or hyperkalemia are causes, but we are unable to give injections of potassium, that sort of thing. So there are a number of causes of a cardiac arrest that we can't address the underlying cause. But what we can do by giving either CPR or compression-only resuscitation is to keep that person alive long enough for the ambulance to get there and for them to provide the advanced cardiac life support, such as giving oxygen or giving fluids, or addressing many of the other causes of a cardiac arrest. So we need to, for the unconscious person who is breathing normally, we need to be able to protect their airway, and so we need to be able to place them in a coma position, which protects their airway until the ambulance can get there. So, you know, we teach people how to roll them safely whilst looking after the cervical spine. And in fact, not just the cervical spine, it's the whole spine that we need to care for. So we teach how to do a proper log roll and that sort of thing. And then in terms of anaphylaxis, as I said, we teach people how to use an EpiPen properly. Fractures are pretty common. We need to learn how to minimize the pain for those people, how to treat that fracture and get them to the emergency department for treatment. And no burns. So burns can be caused by lots of things. So we can have electrical burns, we can have flame burns, we can have chemical burns.
And we can have sunburns.
Oh, sunburn. Sunburn in Australia. I have seen people walk into an emergency department with blisters hanging off their skin. They've been out, and British people burn badly, don't they? And fair-haired people and red-haired people burn badly. And yeah, so there's a lot of burning happens in Australia. So it doesn't have to be, you know, the normal burns that we would think, you know, flame, that sort of thing. So how do we treat those, and what sort of people should be worried about? Because people will often inhale, you know, the smoke, and with that, they're, you know, inhaling carbon monoxide, and we need to be able to treat that appropriately by giving more oxygen. And obviously that's an advanced cardiac life support thing. But just a normal burn, a steam burn or a hot water burn, you know, just running that burn under tap water for about 20 minutes will help with the pain and help stop the burning process. So these are all handy things to, you know, to know and understand. And I have a funny story about allergic reactions and anaphylaxis. So I originally came from Yorkshire in England. And being a Yorkshireman, I make a very mean roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. So I'd been in the garden all day on this particular day. And I'd finished up, I'd cooked the beef, and I plated it all. The Yorkshire puddings were ready, everything was on the plate. And I put the plates on the table. And I said to my wife, I think I might have a tick on my side. And I lifted up my shirt, and sure enough, there was a very, very small tick lodged in my side. So she played around with it for a while and managed to get it out. I opened my beer, sat at the table, and I suddenly started to itch. I lifted up my shirt, and I had what's called an urticarial rash, which is like a whole lot of hives joined together. And I said to my wife, I think I'm going to have to go to hospital. And do you know what she said to me? She cut a piece of meat, put it in her mouth, and said, how are you going to get there? Because my roast beef was so good, she wasn't leaving that to take me to hospital. So I had to make my own way there.
Oh.
So,
well, that just shows how good your cooking is.
Yeah, well, especially roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. And so when I was working in emergency, I spent a lot of time working on triage. And for those people that don't know what triage is, it's basically trying to establish how urgently people need to be treated by the doctor and whereabouts they're going to be treated, whether they need to be in a bed or whether they can go and sit in a waiting room or whatever. And I saw many, many times when I was sitting on triage, cars pull up outside the emergency department and men get out of the car with towels around their arm, and you would know immediately they were bleeding. And they would drip blood from the car all the way to the triage window, drop blood all over the floor. When you got them in, they had a cut that was perhaps a couple of inches long on their arm. And You know, instead of putting a little bit of pressure on it and stopping it, they were just putting towel on top of towel on top of towel. So, you know, simple things like that. How to stop a bleeding nose. And then, you know, when we are teaching our courses, I say to people, well, what position do you put the patient in? And then many people say, yes, you put them with their head back and put some ice on their neck, of course, which is all rubbish. You don't put them with their head back, you put them with their head forward, because if you put them with their head back, where's that blood going? It's going down into it's going into their stomach, and when it comes out again, I have to tell you, it is not pretty. So you know, we teach how to look after people with head injuries, because traumatic brain injury is still the leading cause of death following trauma. How to treat head injuries, what we should be looking for. We look at chest injuries and abdominal injuries, and the sorts of injuries you can have and how you go about treating them. And then, you know, stroke, for instance. So we think of stroke as being an old person's disease. But in actual fact, you can have a stroke in the womb.
Yeah, I've
because
heard of that.
there are different types of stroke. There are bleeding strokes, and there are what's called ischemic strokes. And ischemic strokes occur from lack of blood and lack of oxygen to the brain. So if a mother has, you know, some problems and the blood and oxygen is not getting to the fetus can have a stroke in the womb, which is actually quite amazing, isn't it? Most people wouldn't know that. But stroke is a time-critical illness, and yet most people would generally delay for, I think the average is around about 2 hours delay from the onset of symptoms to when they seek medical treatment. But in actual fact, if you can get to the hospital fairly quickly, you have a 4-hour window of when they can give clot-busting drugs, and that is absolutely life-changing. It means the difference between, you know, perhaps spending the rest of your life in a nursing home being looked after 24/7, or carrying on a fairly normal life. So those things are very important. And you know, we look at diabetes and seizures. Now, once upon a time, you could tell, and I mean, I've been around nursing for a long time, but once upon a time, you could tell epileptics because most of their front teeth would be broken, because people would shove spoon handles into their mouths to stop them biting their tongue. You know, so these days, we don't promote that at all. You know, we just promote how to look after that person, how to stop them from injuring themselves, how to maintain a patent airway, those sorts of things. How to look after amputated parts, for instance. So, you know, you never ever put an amputated part in any form of liquid. You put it in a dry bag, you seal the bag, and you put the bag in iced water, and that helps that amputated part become viable for a lot longer, so that there's a chance perhaps that you know, they can sew that amputated part back on. So they are some of the things that you know, we teach in our course, and they are some of the things that could be useful as a parent or as a bystander. I remember there was a case not long ago here. I think it was in New South Wales. You may remember it, Bronie. And it involved, I think, an Indian family and a swimming pool. And a child fell into a swimming pool and got into difficulties. And I think the grandfather jumped in and the father jumped in, and both the grandfather and the father drowned in a swimming pool. And the mother, I think, eventually jumped in and saved the child. But in actual fact, if someone had been there that knew first aid, those two fellows probably could have been revived. So they are some of the things that I think it's important to know as I said at the beginning, we're already doing many things to protect our families. So why wouldn't you learn a little bit about how to protect them if one of these sudden events happens? I'm not saying that you will be an expert after doing the first aid course. You won't. You won't be an expert, but at least you'll have some idea of the sorts of things that you need to do to keep your family alive and well.
Yes, because, you know, like you said, when something happens, particularly to someone we love, all our knowledge can often go out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And you go into panic mode almost, instead of being able to do what you can. But just knowing that you have that little bit of knowledge, you know, you can sort of take a deep breath, stop yourself, and it'll come back, which is important. And a little bit of training like that, like first aid training, you know, like you said, you won't be an expert. You may not always get it completely right, but you should know enough to help save that person, or do what you can for that person while you're waiting for the emergency services to arrive. And because I live out of town, and and our roads are really shocking, so it takes a while for the emergency services to get out here. Our neighbour was a classic example. He just dropped, clearly from a heart attack, and his wife yelled out to us over the fence. He was in his 70s, and we raced over there. This is very early one morning, a couple of years back, and in our pajamas, and did what we could. But it seemed to be like forever for the emergency people to get there. So it was close to 40 minutes, maybe more, close to an hour before they could get there. And that's, you know, through calling them and then doing whatever, and trying to navigate our shocking roads. But
well, you know, there's quite a lot of things on YouTube, but you know, people learn differently, don't they? Some people learn by looking, some people learn by reading, but I think one of the best ways of learning is by doing. And that's why, I mean, for instance, you can look on YouTube and learn how to put on a splint to a broken arm, how to put on bandages, how to you know, put on triangular bandages, that sort of thing. So there's lots of things there on YouTube that you can look at. But I think the best teacher is by doing. So, you know, by putting on a pressure immobilization bandage, by putting on a splint and a sling, and putting on the bandage, because there's two ways to put on the bandage. There's the right way and the wrong way. But by putting on bandages and, you know, doing practical things such as doing, you know, the cardiac compressions on a mannequin, and on an adult mannequin, and doing cardiac compressions on a baby mannequin. They are,
because the pressure's is different for both of them.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
and so you can't, you know, like, you know, when they're a full-grown adult male, you're obviously going to do you need to do a far deeper compression than for a baby, where you sort of got to be really gentle and just using really two fingers.
2 fingers or 2 thumbs, that's right. And so, you know, in my experience, I've seen many people doing cardiac compressions, and most people go far too fast. I mean, I'm an old guy. You know, the recommendation by the Australian Resus Council, excuse me, is that compressions are done at a rate of 100 to 120 a minute. But I'm an old guy. I'm doing 100 a minute. But if you're not doing those efficiently, you're going to get tired more quickly. And if you're not doing them effectively, you might as well not be doing them at all. So these are the sort of things that we are teaching in our course. And I would think that anybody who's conducting first aid courses is going to be teaching you the proper way to do it, the most efficient way and the most effective way to do those things. Excuse me. So I think, you know, turning up to a first aid course, wherever that might be, and doing those practical things, putting on splints and bandages, and, you know, giving EpiPens, doing, you know, giving the asthma spray properly, you know, using a spacer. As I said, I read somewhere that up to 90% of asthmatics don't give their medication properly. Excuse me, which is a rather frightening statistic. So we teach how to do it properly, and how we use the spacer. So I think any first aid program would be teaching you all of those things.
I want to ask you a question, David.
Oh, just one. Okay, go.
Going back now, I know this may sound silly, but we were talking about, and because it's springtime and the snakes are out with their babies and everything, and you're talking about snake bites, and you talked about the arm and the leg. What if you're bitten somewhere else on your body? How are you going to handle that? 2 bandages may not be enough.
Well, look, if you get bitten on the neck, you can't put a pressure immobilization bandage there. Okay.
No.
You're not laughing. You're not laughing. But look, really, there's not a lot you can do if you're bitten on other than a limb. But the chances are fairly high that when you get bitten, you're going to be bitten either on the arm or the leg. If you're walking through the bush, usually you're going to get bitten on the leg. Now, death adders, for instance, are notorious for lying and not moving when you approach them. So, you know, people are bitten by death adders, for instance, by stepping over a log. A lot of the other snakes will actually try and head the other way. They don't have good hearing, but what they can do is feel the vibrations on the ground. And red belly black snakes will go for their lives when they can feel you approaching. But
yeah, that's why they say it's good to wear boots and
wear boots.
Don't gently walk through the bush.
Yes, and look, yeah, I've seen people walking through the bush in thongs, or what's flip-flops you might call them in other countries, but you know, you need to be dressed appropriately. Many bushwalkers wear shorts with you know, socks that are sort of down around their ankles, with boots. So, you know, the majority get bitten on the lower leg. But a snake is a venomous snake until proven otherwise. So don't try and identify the snake. A snake is a venomous snake until proven otherwise. So put the pressure immobilization bandage on, get to an emergency department, and they can do some tests there to try and determine the variety of snake. So,
I mean, obviously it's handy if you know, if you can tell them it's a brown snake or it's a red belly.
Well,
they're the most common we see around here.
Yeah, red bellies are generally fairly easy to pick out, but sometimes the belly is not red. I think they may have a blue belly, but still same type of snake. But I do remember once getting a phone call in the emergency department from somebody in Gloucester. Now, Gloucester is around about, what would you say, 80 kilometres away from the hospital in Taree.
Yeah, easy.
And they said that, you know, this young lady had been bitten by a tiger snake. And so we said, all right, well, you need to get into hospital. Well, it was over an hour later that they actually arrived. They didn't come by ambulance. They came by car, which was their first mistake. And when I was triaging, I said to them, how do you know it was a tiger snake? Because the tiger snake in Australia has bands. Yeah. And they said, oh, well, yes, it had the stripes on it. And I said, where is the snake? And they said, oh, it's up in the car. It was dead. Fortunately, I was going to let them in the emergency department with a live snake. Anyway, I said, well, go and get the snake. And they brought the snake in, and it was in a dish with a tea towel cover. And when I lifted off the cover, it wasn't a tiger snake. It was a death adder, because death adders will also sometimes have bands around them. So don't try and identify snakes. Snakes are venomous until proven otherwise. Leave it to the experts.
Yeah, and I always believed that tiger snakes were actually more in Victoria than anywhere else.
Oh, no, I think they're pretty widespread in New South Wales.
I didn't come across tiger snakes until we spent 10 years in Victoria, and that's where I came across tiger snakes. And they were really quite a lot of them around where we live.
Yeah.
So,
well, they do say, and I don't know about this, they say that it's good to have red-bellied black snakes around, because red-bellied black snakes kill the brown snakes, and the brown snakes are very, very venomous. There's quite a number of people die from brown snake bites every year. And I just reminded of another story, and you would remember this, because it happened only several weeks ago, going back to bleeding and how to stop bleeding. So remember, in Port Macquarie, which is an hour away from Taree, further north, a surfer was bitten by a shark, and he was bitten on the leg, and he was bleeding profusely, and it was a life-threatening bleed. And I believe an off-duty policeman was walking his dog on the beach, and he used the dog's lead as a tourniquet to stop the bleeding from the leg of the surfer. And so the surfer's now vowing to get back in the water as soon as he can. But
yeah, that was only recently.
These are the sort of things that it's useful to
You could
know.
use anything for a tourniquet. If you can, I've seen men pull their belts off their pants to use as a tourniquet.
They will work, but you can't tighten it enough just by, how you would tighten an ordinary belt, by pulling on the end of it. You can't tighten it enough. You need to have something like a stick or something like that to get the belt and twist it tight. You will not get enough pressure from just putting on a belt and putting it tight as you would normally do it around your waist. That won't work. You need to have much more pressure than that.
So there's an interesting tip. So did you have any questions, or Yvonne, did you have any questions for David?
I haven't got any questions, but I do have a couple of observations. I mean, I was on an aeroplane flying from Sydney to Perth, and someone had what we thought was a heart attack, and I've got it can happen anywhere. What I'm saying, it can happen anywhere. And they had went and got the stewardesses, and then the plane got stopped. The plane hadn't taken off. It was just about to take off. No, the plane hadn't taken off. Just about to. So they stopped the plane. Anyway, they pulled out that monitor, that electrical, the recording machine box thing that they put the paddles on.
Yeah, okay. So you're talking about an AED? Was it the defibrillator?
Defibrillator. That's the word. Yeah.
Okay.
But there was a doctor on the plane, and she did she was at the head end working the instrument, and I was at the feet end. But that was pretty self-explanatory. It told us what to do. I mean, they were pretty good. Yeah. The person died. The person lived. It ended up being I had a bad reaction to peanuts or something. I'm not sure what it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They usually take peanuts off the plane.
Did the man or did the passenger know that they were allergic to peanuts?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know the details. They had an anaphylactic shock for something, and they were taken off the plane, and we were just told when we got to Perth that the person had survived.
Wow. Well,
we were held up. But all I'm saying is that it can happen anywhere.
Yes, of course it can.
I was in the middle of a plane, like
absolutely right. Absolutely
Yeah.
right. I mean, we Fame does first aid at different events, and we
Yep.
were up at Coffs Harbour some months ago at a motocross event, and the racing hadn't even started, and this lady came over and said, "Could you come and have a look at my husband because he has some chest pain?"
Oh.
So the paramedic and myself went over there, and we looked at the husband, and fortunately Coffs Harbour Hospital was probably a kilometre away. And we said, okay, well, drop everything, get in the car, drive over to the emergency department and tell them what is going on. And when I rang later to find out what had happened to him, he'd had a heart attack and he was in the coronary care unit.
Wow.
That was before the racing even started.
Mm.
So, yes.
The thought of racing was too much.
He wasn't one of the competitors. He was going to be, I think, one of the stewards. But yeah, look, these things can happen in a nanosecond, and some of these things are life-changing, like a stroke. A stroke is life-changing. But if you can get to the hospital in a reasonable time, and it's an ischemic stroke, not a bleeding type of stroke, they can give you clot-busting drugs. And also the ambulance, for instance, when they get to you, they can give you clot-busting drugs if you've had a heart attack. And that can help, you know, the rest of the heart muscles survive. So, but it's unless you know these things, you won't be able to help. There's not a lot you can do for someone who's having a heart attack, except you could perhaps... you know, they may have had a heart attack previously. They may have some medication with them. If you suspect someone's having a heart attack, you give them some aspirin to chew, and that helps, you know, prevent clotting. Helps to stop the platelets clotting. But if you knew these things, you could help out. But for some of the things, obviously, you can't do a lot other than reassure, keep the people comfortable, and that sort of thing.
There's also there's also some pretty good apps on phones these days.
Yeah, there are, yes. I don't have any of them. There is an app.
No, you don't need them.
I don't need them, but there is an app on the phone that tells the emergency services your location when you ring the emergency services. I have an app on my phone, excuse me. I have an app on my phone, which is the New South Wales Ambulance app, and that lists a lot of the treatment that the ambulance service give for different problems.
Yvonne, did you have any questions as well?
A question on how do you remove ticks when you get a tick on you?
Okay.
What's the best method?
So there are a number of methods. There is a freezing method. You can get that, I think, from the chemist. We have one here, which we use on ourselves and the dogs. And you simply freeze the tick in position and the tick dies. There is another method that we have for the dogs. And again, I think you can buy it at a pharmacy, and it's a tick remover. And what it is a small plastic hook type apparatus, if you like. And it comes in two sizes, one for the larger ticks and one for the smaller ticks. And you choose the correct size. You hook this apparatus under the shoulders of the tick, and you simply lever the tick out, and it comes out intact, head and beak. So I've used that one quite a lot, and I've used the freezing method, and both of those will work.
And what if you don't have either of those on hand?
Go and get one.
Well, if the person has a tick,
Well, I mean, it's tick season now. It's
That's true.
springtime in Australia. We've had some rain. The ticks are out. We removed a tick from one of our dogs 2 weeks ago, and it was a paralysis tick. So the ticks are there, and you hear about animals succumbing to ticks quite often. All of our animals have been bitten by ticks, and both my wife and myself have had many tick bites. And it's surprising, some of these ticks are about the size of the head of a pin, and they're only nymphs. And boy, do they cause a reaction. Obviously it's the paralysis tick that you need to worry about. If you don't have anything at the moment to remove a tick, well, go and get something.
We nearly lost my son-in-law from a tick bite in New Zealand. We got picked up Lyme's disease from it.
Well, they do say there isn't that they don't have Lyme's disease in Australia, but I think there are polarized opinions to that. I think.
Well, that was his problem. He got bitten by a tick in New Zealand, came to Australia. They all said they don't have Lyme's disease in Australia, and it was a year before they worked out it had been bitten by a tick.
Yeah,
and that was the drama. If he'd have seen a New Zealand doctor, they would have picked it up straight away and done the appropriate things, and he would have been fine. But as it was, he was paralysed for 3 months.
Yeah, look, I think there are different schools of thought there, and many people believe that we do have Lyme's disease in Australia. But I think, if you've been bitten by a tick and you're displaying those symptoms, then I'd be getting second opinions.
When I was in the military, when we were in tick area and we weren't inundated with ticks, we were out by ourselves quite a lot. We would get told to ring up and they'll send out a medic for us. And they would. A medic would get flown out by helicopter, take out the tick. Yeah.
To take out the tick?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, yeah. Because we're only two-man parties. We're only two-man parties. We're out for weeks at a time. And if we got bitten by a tick, they didn't want to muck around. So, but I never got bitten by one. They weren't that prevalent.
No.
It wasn't like it was happening every day.
No.
They would send out a medic to take out the tick.
Yep.
Now I'm going. Oh, Yvonne's muted herself again. I thought she might have had another question. Did that answer your question, Yvonne? No, she's still.
Yes, thank you.
Did you have another one?
No, I haven't. That's the only one.
Awesome. All right. Well, guys,
very interesting.
It is. It's amazing that what you can learn during doing a first aid course that can be of benefit to everyone. It's just to yourself even. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh gosh, I've been doing that wrong. And the difference between surviving and not.
We do first aid at events, and for most of the day we will sit around and not do anything, which is a good day for us. But people come along and say, geez, I've got to get into this first aid lark. He said, you're getting paid for sitting around all day doing nothing. And I usually say, well, do you insure your house? Do you insure your car? Yes, you do. Do you use that insurance? Probably not. Well, with your house anyway. So having someone there who can do first aid is a type of insurance. And the other thing that I say to them is, well, would you prefer that we were busy all day treating people who've been injured? And of course, the answer is no, isn't it?
No, that's
you
right.
don't want to be busy all day treating people who've been injured. You don't want to see people injured, but it's an insurance.
That's right. And the other thing, we didn't touch on it, that I mentioned earlier, is this time of year, well, all year round, you should be looking after your hydration. But this time of year in particular, dehydration is a big thing.
It is a big thing.
And it can cause strokes and heart attacks and things too. So it's amazing what being dehydrated can do.
Exactly, and you know, I know that we've had an aged care royal commission and that sort of thing, but when I worked in emergency, the number of residents from aged care centres that were sent to us that were so dry, when you looked at their tongue, it was like leather. You could have almost, you know, resoled your shoe. Their tongue was so dry. And you know, as you're absolutely right, the dehydration caused many problems. And if they've been properly hydrated, a trip to hospital may have become unnecessary.
And I bet they never thought they were thirsty.
Look, there's a number of reasons, I suppose. You know, as people get older, they you know, tend to get a little bit of incontinence, and you know, they don't want to be getting up and going to the toilet a lot through the night, so they tend not to you know, drink so much. But yeah, keeping up the fluids is really important. Most of our body is made up of fluid.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's like your kidneys stop working. You know, it's just.
Well, I think who was the British doctor who was in Greece recently, who went for a bit of a walk in hot weather?
And, yes, I remember him.
Michael, somebody. Michael, I can't remember his last name.
Whatever his name
Crawford
was.
or something like that.
He would have died of dehydration.
Yeah,
and you would have thought he would have known better, being a doctor. But
it only just walked through a town where he could have drunk plenty of water.
Yeah.
But the silly thing is, a lot of people don't realise they're dehydrated, and I say to people all the time, by the time you are feeling thirsty, you are already ready, well and truly dehydrated.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Absolutely.
If you have a headache coming on, it's because of, unless you've been knocked on the head or something, it's usually dehydration.
Well, it's one of the first signs of diabetes, isn't it? So,
yes.
You know, the first signs of diabetes are people are dry, they're dehydrated because the fluid is being withdrawn from their cells. So they become thirsty, so they drink a lot. And because they drink a lot, they tend to pass a lot of water. And because they don't have insulin, the sugar is not able to enter the cell where it is used for energy. And if they can't use sugar for energy, then they use fats for energy. So they're the three classical signs of diabetes, aren't they? Increased thirst, increased urination, and weight loss.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? All
anyway,
right.
I have to go, Bronnie. So
yeah, I'm going to say,
thank you very much, David. Yep,
we are almost
Thanks,
up to the hour, so
thanks for coming
David.
along, Grant.
That's a pleasure. I might meet one day. Okay.
You might do that. You come to Tara and do your first aid training, then you might meet him.
I might do, yeah. All right. Well, we've got more chance than the. I don't know. Yeah, okay. All right. Catch you around. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so thank you very much for coming, David. And as I say here in Bronie's World, I ask everyone to stay safe, stay informed, be empowered, but do not live in fear, my friends. And when you're getting that first aid training and learning how to save lives and save yourself, then you too will be powerful, beautiful, brilliant, and most definitely very brave. God bless you all. Catch you again tomorrow here in Bronie's World.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Dave.